Disclaimer: this episode may include graphic descriptions of crime and criminal activity. It therefore may not be suitable for listeners who are under the age of 18 or people who may find the descriptions as disturbing. Listeners' discretion is advised from this point forward. Hello and welcome to this episode of Crime KE podcast. My good name is Ajuma. I am a journalist from Kenya and your host for this true crime podcast. This week's episode is an update from one of the episodes from season 1. As you can see from the title, it is the story on the brutal murder of Tob Cohen. Now, if you haven't listened to the story, you should probably go back and listen to it before you listen to this episode, because you might not understand some of the references in this episode if you don't. Now, the Cohen episode was published on 9th May of 2024 for those who need to go back and listen to it. It has been almost a year since I did the story, and I am genuinely glad that there is some movement in the case, because if you have listened to most of the cases in season 1, most of them just reached a certain point and they disappear, like no one talks about them anymore. I actually didn't think that I would be doing an update on this case for that same reason. So seeing that there is still a push to get justice in Tob Cohen's murder gives me so much hope for his family, and I hope that they get the justice that they seek. And now, without further ado, let us get into today's update episode. Also, please stick around until the end of this episode to find out how you can support this podcast. Now, if you've reached this point of the episode, I am assuming that you have listened to last year's episode. So because it has been long since I put that story out, I'll just do a quick recap, then we can get into the updates. Tob Cohen was a 71-year-old Dutch businessman based in Nairobi, Kenya. He fell in love with the country and the people, so he decided to relocate and live in Kenya. He was married to one Sarah Wairimu Cohen, who was and still remains the main suspect in his murder. Now, from the look of things, and even just testimony from Tob Cohen's family, the two did not have the rosiest of marriages. Cohen went missing in July of 2019, but he was found dead and dumped in a septic tank at his home in Kitisuru more than 50 days later. Sarah was charged with Cohen's murder after she made several inconsistent statements to police about about her husband's death. She went on trial and her lawyer gave really strong reasons as to why she could be innocent. The case was withdrawn by the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions in December 2022. Then, at that time, the DPP filed a nolle prosequi and ordered a public inquest into the case. Now, most of the cases in season 1, it always ends like that. Like, the prosecution orders a public inquest, an inquest is done, then nothing is ever heard about the case. But I'm so glad that this case has some movement. At the time I put out the first episode, the inquest was still ongoing and Sarah was free. She was free until January this year, and that is where the update comes in. Sarah Wairimu was arrested on Thursday, 23rd of January. That was after it was alleged that there was fresh evidence directly linking her to Tob Cohen's murder. Now, before her arrest, there were several conflicts between her and Tob Cohen's family, mostly about Cohen's will and the properties that he owned. But also, the family did not shy away from sharing that they believed that Sarah was responsible for Cohen's murder. Now, after her arrest in January, the DPP charged her with murder for a second time, and she was arraigned at Kibera Law Courts, and she pleaded not guilty for the second time. Her bail application was denied for several reasons, including the fact that The prosecution said that she was capable of interfering with witnesses or even fleeing the country. Now, the judge said that she denied her bail application because she had received evidence that Sarah had intimidated a police officer and she had not expressed any remorse for it. So, if she could intimidate a police officer, maybe the prosecution's allegations that she could flee the country were valid. Now, at some point during the bail hearing, Cohen's family petitioned to have Sarah removed from her matrimonial home because they say that it was still a crime scene. I'm not sure if that request was granted, but it was something that was put forward during the bail hearing. Now, onto the trial. The trial begins, and the prosecution presents in their opening statement. They say that they are ready to prove that Sarah Wairimu played a huge role in Tob Cohen's murder. The prosecution say that they would present forensic findings, DNA results, DNA results, entomology studies, cybercrime analysis, witness testimony, and even the autopsy report to prove their case. Now, the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions described Sarah and Cohen's relationship as toxic and full of conflict. And they also say that they would prove their case, and they would prove that Sarah premeditated and carried out her husband's murder in cold blood. And the defense on their part say that they were ready to defend Sarah from the allegations and that they would prove that she is innocent. This is a case that I am definitely going to be following because I want to see how the wheels of justice stand on this one. The next hearing is set for May 7th, and Sarah Wairimu will remain in remand until then. Now, during the first trial, the details of Cohen's autopsy were not made public, but now during this trial, they have been made public, and I wanted to end this episode by sharing the findings in the autopsy. The autopsy was conducted by a team of 5 pathologists led by the chief government pathologist, Johansen Odwar, and they found that Cohen sustained multiple injuries. He sustained multiple fractures on both hands. He had bruises on most of his body. He had broken ribs. He had injuries to his internal organs. He sustained a deep cut above the right eye. He had a severe cranial injury caused by blunt force trauma, and he also had what was described as a wide laceration on the head. His cause of death was determined to be multiple injuries caused by blunt force trauma. Now, according to the postmortem, Cohen was subjected to extensive torture leading up to his death. I found one article that said that Tob Cohen was allegedly murdered by his farm workers who were allegedly hired by Sarah Wairimu. Thank you for listening to this episode until the end. That is all I have for you on this update episode. As I said, I'll be following this case closely, and any other updates that will be shared on the podcast on this case will be shared on the podcast social media pages. So be sure to follow us to get those updates when they arrive. Yeah, so this has been a really short episode because it was requested. So I just decided to do an update episode because I couldn't put this in a social media post. I couldn't put all this in a social media post. So I decided to do an update episode. If there is a case that you want us to do an update on, please share with us. We have an Instagram page and a WhatsApp number that you can reach me through. I have not crammed it. It is in the show notes of this episode though. You can support this podcast by sharing it with your circle so that we can build a larger community to listen in. Follow the podcast on social media if you don't already. Crime KE Podcast is now available on YouTube. My YouTube channel is at Ajuma on YouTube. You will find this podcast on the podcast tab of the podcast channel, or if you just search Crime KE Podcast, it will pop up on your page. You can find this podcast on Instagram at crime.ke. I usually post the crime cases that I talk about on the podcast, updates like this from cases from season 1, and even just some educational content that I find insightful. If you have any feedback on the podcast, you can share it through my social media platforms, the podcast Instagram page, or even the comment section on Spotify and YouTube. If there's a case that you want me to talk about, again, you can DM me or the podcast on social media, and I will definitely get to it. My social media handles are in the show notes of this episode. Reach out. I love interacting with listeners of this podcast. Give the podcast a 5-star rating on the platform that you're listening in on, and don't forget to catch the next episode of Crime KE podcast on Thursday next week, same time and same place. But until then, stay safe and remember, it is crime with a K.